This video is brought to you by Brilliant. France and Turkey really don't get on. In just the last few years, Erdogan has called Macron brain dead, suggested he needs mental health treatment, and basically told him to get out of Africa. It looked like relations were heading for a reset in 2022, but they've continued their downwards trend recently, in part due to the chaos sweeping Francophone Africa. So in this video, we're going to have a look at why France and Turkey don't get on, how the political instability in Africa is exacerbating tensions, and what might happen next. Before we start, if you haven't already, please consider subscribing and ringing the bell to stay in the loop and be notified when we release new videos. As we see it, French-Turkish relations really started deteriorating in the late 2010s for three reasons: Syria, Libya, and the maritime dispute in the Eastern Mediterranean. The disagreement over Syria began in 2014, when France joined the international community to combat ISIS militants in northern Syria. Turkey didn't like the fact that this coalition was cooperating with the Kurdish People's Defence Unit, or YPG, mostly because it's an offshoot of the Kurdistan Workers' Party, or PKK. For context, the PKK are a Kurdish separatist group that's been fighting an insurgent campaign against the Turkish state since 1978. Turkey was especially annoyed at the French, both because the PKK are designated as a terrorist group by French authorities and because the French got more involved in Syria than most of the other members of the coalition. Tensions escalated in 2019, when, literally a couple of days after Trump withdrew US support for Kurdish forces in northeastern Syria, Erdogan decided to intervene. This wasn't a good look for NATO, not least because Turkey's offensive wasn't coordinated with other NATO members, but also because Turkey was basically fighting NATO's longtime ally. Almost immediately, France said it wanted an EU-wide arms embargo on Turkey, and a few months later, at that year's NATO summit, Macron accused Erdogan of supporting ISIS proxies, and famously described the alliance as brain dead. In response, Erdogan said it's Macron who's brain dead, and threatened to veto NATO's new Baltic defence plan to deploy more forces to NATO's eastern flank, unless the rest of the bloc stopped cooperating with the YPG. In Libya, Turkey and France were again on different sides, but this time Turkey was on the same page as the rest of NATO in supporting the Tripoli-based and UN-recognised government of national accord, while France was actually on the same side as Russia in supporting General Haftar and his Libyan National Army. France started secretly supporting Haftar in early 2015, but only publicly admitted to it a year later when 3 French special forces were killed in a helicopter crash near Benghazi. France backed Haftar in part because they were worried about the threat of Islamist terror groups taking over the country and instability spreading to Francophone West Africa, and the French apparently concluded that the best way to prevent this was with a strongman like Haftar. In retrospect, France's support for Haftar, even if it was both cynical and ultimately ineffective, does look prescient. One of the main reasons that West Africa has collapsed into chaos recently is because weapons and militants have flooded south from Libya into Saharan Africa, destabilising the region. Anyway, French-Turkish tensions peaked in 2020, when just as it looked like Haftar was about to take Tripoli, and therefore total control of Libya, Turkey intervened decisively on behalf of the GNA, and Haftar was forced to retreat. There was then an altercation between the French and Turkish navies in June 2020, when Turkish ships apparently took aim at a French ship trying to carry out a cargo inspection of a third ship suspected of smuggling Turkish weapons into Tripoli. In the Eastern Mediterranean, Turkey has basically been in a complicated and long-running dispute with Greece and a couple of other countries over their maritime territories, which was exacerbated by the discovery of gas reserves in the region and a series of controversial deals between the other countries that essentially tried to exclude Turkey. Again, this escalated in 2020, when France basically sided with Greece and announced that it would be stepping up its naval presence in the region, before signing a formal defence deal with Greece a year later. At about the same time, Macron had another go at Erdogan for his, quote, warlike rhetoric, encouraging Turkey's ally Azerbaijan to restart its conflict with Armenia over Nagorno-Karabakh. So you get the idea. By 2020, French-Turkish relations were in the dumps, and things got worse in late 2020 after French schoolteacher Samuel Paty was beheaded for showing his students cartoons of Mohammed. after Macron warned of a broader risk of, quote, Islamic separatism and defended Pati's right to free speech. Erdogan suggested that Macron needed mental health treatment. France then withdrew its ambassador from Turkey, while Erdogan called for a boycott of French goods and threatened to sue French magazine Charlie Hebdo for publishing an unflattering cartoon. A couple of years ago, it looked like French-Turkish relations might be on the mend. Macron and Erdogan had a cordial bilateral at the NATO summit in July 2021, before another in Baghdad, prompting French Foreign Minister to declare a, quote, recovery period, and the Ukraine war at least temporarily unified NATO against Russia. However, in the last year or so, relations have resumed their downwards trajectory. This is in part because France has suddenly started calling for the EU to admit Ukraine and the Western Balkans into the bloc, despite holding up Turkey's application for decades now. But it's mainly to do with what's happening in West Africa. Essentially, for the last couple of years, Turkey has been building its influence in northern and West Africa, largely because ever since the Arab Spring, Erdogan has been trying to fashion himself as the leader of the Muslim world. Turkey has been deepening its security and commercial ties in many Muslim-majority African countries, and implicitly presenting itself as a sort of anti-colonial alternative to France. While visiting Mali, Erdogan asked what business France had in the country, noting that 95% of the Malayan population is Muslim, and in Gabon, Erdogan told a crowd that Africa belongs to Africans, and that we are not here for your gold. Last year, Turkey launched a French-language version of its state broadcaster, clearly aimed at increasing its influence in Francophone Africa. Turkey has also sold weapons and drones to Mali, Burkina Faso and Niger, and Turkish mining companies have signed big contracts in Mali, Burkina Faso and Guinea. As you might have noticed, all these countries have suffered coups recently, and many of the emergent military juntas are explicitly anti-French. Unsurprisingly, the French don't like this. Not only is Turkey competing with France as a security partner and winning lucrative mineral contracts that used to go to French companies, but many French diplomats believe that Turkey's presentation as a non-colonial alternative to France has contributed to the instability and the anti-French sentiment sweeping the region. So you get the idea. France and Turkey weren't getting on anyway, but French-Turkish competition in Africa has made things even worse. And at the moment, Turkey seems to be winning. Now, you just spent around 8 minutes watching a video to help you learn about the world around you. And that feels good, right? Well, that's the feeling you get from spending time learning and bettering yourself. And if you want to do this more, then we have good news. Long-term supporter of the channel, Brilliant, are giving the first 200 people who sign up using our link 20% off their annual premium subscription. Brilliant is an interactive online learning platform which is full of all kinds of courses which can help you improve your career and further improve your understanding of the world. They have more than 100 courses on everything from predicting with probability to how technology works to the concept of infinity. And these may sound like topics that you need to dedicate a lot of your time to, but you really don't. You can master big concepts in as little as 15 minutes a day, and you can do this anywhere, anytime. You can find the link in the description below. Thanks for watching, and thanks again to Brilliant for supporting TLDR.